But one of the things I did want to mention to you again is we've got this website, Great Game India, that has already been determined to be false by PolitiFact, and that was printed in Sunday's paper here, the Tampa Bay Times. And what was Great Game India reporting on? They were reporting on a study that was done in the northeastern state of Nagaland in India that potentially points to the Wuhan Institute of Virology as being a source for this coronavirus outbreak. Now, that's a story we sort of mentioned to you last week in our Out There segment, and there is some reasoning behind this. This isn't just something that was said. This is actually a study that was done, and it was done on bats, and it was done on bat hunters in this northeast Indian state of Nagaland, and it basically found the presence of antibodies from the Ebola virus in bats and bat hunters in Nagaland, and there's no reason that should be there. There hasn't been any Ebola virus in that area in India. There's absolutely no reason any of these study subjects should be showing the antibodies of having been exposed to the Ebola virus. So the operating thesis is perhaps this, because that particular state, like I said, the northeast part of India is very close to China. So perhaps these antibodies got into the bat population and then into the bat hunter population because of some kind of experiment on bioweapons that was being done in China, and somehow the bug, as it always seems to do, escapes. It escapes and gets into the bat population. Now, the Indian government's even ordered an investigation into this study. So now we've had PolitiFact declare something to be false, and it looks like there may be more to it than just that. And what research did PolitiFact do to declare all of this false? Well, we can lean back and rely on the fact that a U.S. senator's been talking about this. Okay, so you want to talk about giving it a little bit of credibility. Now let's hear some of what Tom Cotton had to say, Senator Tom Cotton, last week in the U.S. Senate.
I want to talk about the biggest and the most important story in the world, the Wuhan coronavirus. This coronavirus is a catastrophe on the scale of Chernobyl for China, but actually it's probably worse than Chernobyl, which was localized in its effect. The coronavirus could result in a global pandemic. While you were all sleeping overnight, the number of diagnosed cases in China increased by 30%. Now, let me be clear, that's not new cases, that is just newly admitted cases. It is probably several orders of magnitude higher than that. Also, while you were sleeping, China now has its entire border with Russia closed. 2,600 miles, Russia has closed that border. El Al has shut down travel between Israel and China. Air France has shut down travel between China and France. And that's in addition to all the other countries that have already shut down travel. From what we know so far, and there's still many unknowns, this virus could have both a long incubation period, as much as 14 days, and individuals could be contagious while asymptomatic, which was not the case with SARS in 2003. Furthermore, from some cases, it appears that the virus could be aerosolized, which means it doesn't require the kind of contact that you have with, say, a married couple kissing each other or a family living in close quarters in a hotel or apartment, but rather the distances we are all sitting apart right now. Yet China is still lying about all of this. They've been lying about it from the very beginning, and you don't need their history of lying about SARS in 2003, though it is relevant here. You just have to see what's happened over the last 2 months.
Did you hear what he said? He said you can be contagious while asymptomatic. And that's something that we pointed out to you last week as being one of the issues, and that could potentially point to it having been developed as a bioweapon, although we can't conclude that certainly at this point. We haven't been able to do any research on it, but that's the exact type of characteristic that you'd want to develop in a bioweapon. And we learned so much about the different characteristics that you'd want to develop in a bioweapon from examining that book Bitten, which talked about Lyme disease having been developed by Willy Bergdorfer, who was a bioweapon scientist for many, many years in the U.S. bioweapons program. and looking at what are the characteristics that you would want in a bioweapon, and a bioweapon that can be transferred from person to person before anybody knows they're even sick. That is ideal. Let's hear some more from Senator Tom Cotton.
We now know that the first case manifested no later than December 1, even though China didn't reveal it to the WHO until a month later on December 31st, when they continued to hide it from their own citizens. And they continued to say that it had been contained inside Wuhan. Today, it is in every single province in China.
And apparently we've got 11, and that's just the reported cases in the United States, 11 documented cases, and it's all across the country. And believe me, there are more than that. They just haven't manifested yet, and those people have infected other people. But there's still more to hear about from Senator Cotton.
They also claimed for almost 2 months until earlier this week that it had originated in a seafood market in Wuhan.
Listen to that.
That locals had contracted it from animals in, say, bat soup or snake tartare. That is not the case. The Lancet published a study last weekend demonstrating that of the original 40 cases, 14 of them had no contact with the seafood market, including patient 0. As one epidemiologist said, that virus went into the seafood market before it came out of the seafood market. We still don't know where it originated. Could have been another seafood market. Could have been a farm. Could have been a food processing company. I would note that Wuhan also has China's only biosafety level 4 super laboratory that works with the world's most deadly pathogens, to include, yes, coronavirus.
I mean, this is exactly what we were telling you about last week. So I'm glad to hear that we're not the only ones who are thinking like this, and we've got a U.S. senator who's willing to stand up and talk about the truth and use his brain and apply logic, and isn't just going to be dominated by the media blackout on this kind of information. And it is a blackout. I mean, PolitiFact's saying it's already been debunked, it's false, it's nonsense, don't pay any attention, nothing to see here. Twitter is banning news sites from posting on Twitter just for even mentioning this type of thing. I mean, can you believe that? Just for mentioning this type of theory. Now, Tom Cotton also, and I tell you, he sounds pretty upset about this, and although he doesn't get really emotional, he's not like Morgan Streetman, but he sounds pretty upset about this, and the way that he's talking about it, he says, I mean, this has the potential to become a global pandemic, and of course, that's going to be a really big deal, and it's already been a big deal. In China, I mean, you saw the Chinese stock and commodity markets basically crash over the weekend, down almost 10%. China's decided to extend its Lunar New Year for a week in all provinces and almost 2 full weeks in Hubei, which is the province where most of this is occurring. So they've already extended the Lunar New Year, which should have been over. Now they're extending it to February 10th, and then in Hubei province to February 14th. Meanwhile, China's accusing the U.S. of inciting panic just for talking about this as a potential pandemic. But I want you to hear what Tom Cotton has to say about the need to develop a strategy for dealing with this, and what he says about the amount of effort that is going to take, because you may have seen, it's very, very new news, you may have seen that Gilead Sciences, Inc. is already starting human trials of a vaccine in Wuhan. So let's hear from Tom Cotton about what needs to happen to try and combat this potential global pandemic.
Now, look at China's own actions. They have quarantined 60 million people, 60 million, more than the entire population of our West Coast. They've shut down schools indefinitely. Classes canceled nationwide indefinitely. Hong Kong, a part of China, has basically shut down all travel from the mainland. That's why it is essential that we immediately stop all travel on commercial aircraft between China and the United States. Making exceptions, of course, for American citizens to come back, as we just brought back yesterday, allowing essential trade to flow as long as crews on ships and aircraft are not allowed to go into the general population in America, and making exceptions, of course, for medical personnel to go into China to try to get a handle on this. As a defensive measure, I just say again, it is essential that we shut down all commercial air travel immediately between the United States and China. As an offensive measure, because that probably won't stop it entirely, and because if it becomes a global pandemic, we have to deal with countries with very limited capabilities here. We need a Manhattan Project level effort to work with our best research scientists and laboratories in this country to develop a vaccine as quickly as possible.
The amount of effort that went into the Manhattan Project to develop the atomic bomb, that's the amount of effort we're going to need to put towards this? I mean, I think that's probably a little bit of an overstatement, but that's a lot of effort.
What about the hospital built in how many days if they didn't think this was a big deal?
Exactly. Well, we've already banned air travel, and folks coming to the U.S. who aren't already U.S. citizens who are coming from China or have recently been in China. So we're taking some of these steps, but the question is it too little too late? Has the virus already gotten out in the U.S.? Did part of the Chinese cover-up lead us to not take action swiftly enough to stop this? Well, that's a question we're going to find the answer to in the next couple of weeks as we see how this develops. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.